Resolution Ukraine.
Ukraine.
War, Ukraine. The war, Ukraine, Ukraine lives. Ukraine, war lives. War, Ukraine, resolution. Resolution, Ukraine. Ukraine, Ukraine. Resolution lives the war. Ukraine, war, nations. Ukraine,
nations, Ukraine. Resolution, Ukraine, nations, Ukraine.
Nations, lives, Ukraine. Resolution, a war. Resolution, Ukraine. War.
Nations, war. Nations, war. War. Nations, war. Nations, war. 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 Nations, war.
Resolution, nations, resolution, nations. Nations, nations, Ukraine. Ukraine, resolution.
Ukraine, war, balance. Lives, lives, war. Ukraine, nations, nations.
Resolution, resolution, resolution.
Resolution, war. Ukraine, war. Ukraine,
war, Ukraine. Resolution, resolution. Ukraine, Ukraine, nations, Ukraine. War, war. Lives,
Ukraine, lives, Ukraine.
Resolution, resolution, Ukraine. Resolution, Ukraine, Ukraine.
Resolution, Ukraine, Ukraine. Stood for Ukraine, 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 Ukraine.
Resolution, Ukraine, Ukraine, Ukraine. War. Resolution, Ukraine, Ukraine. War.
Ukraine, resolution, nations, lies, Ukraine.
Resolution, nations, nations, war, nations. Use force.
Ukraine, Ukraine, nations, nations. Resumption, resolution, nations.
Resolution, nations, Ukraine, Ukraine, Ukraine. Ukraine, nations, resolution, nations, resolution, nations.
Ukraine, Ukraine, nations, Ukraine, Ukraine.
Resolution, Ukraine, war squads. Resolution, Ukraine, Ukraine. Resolution, resolution, lives, Ukraine, 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 war.
Ukraine, resolution.
Ukraine.
Nations, resolution, Ukraine, Ukraine, Ukraine.
Want lives.
Ukraine, Ukraine, war, Ukraine, nations, Ukraine, 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 Ukraine.
Ukraine, Ukraine, Ukraine.
people of Ukraine.